And hello, everybody. Welcome back to our weekly Great Employees Matter podcast. Our live podcast is a podcast that focuses on the personal development of employees, the professional approach of employers, and in tandem, it results in more confident individuals, more employee-centric leadership, and greater success for all concerned. Thank you all for being on today. My name is Jimmy Bingham, and I, along with my co-founders Kobe Dumas and Lloyd Dix, are thrilled to be able to have a much anticipated, great conversation with our guest of the week, Michael Glassick. Michael is a career change coach. He's a podcast host, so he does this all the time and is possibly even better at it than we are. He's a speaker. He is a lover of helping people. He helps people change their careers without feeling overwhelmed. And he hails from a little town. I don't know the name of the town, but he's about an hour outside of London. I know for a lot of the ladies in the audience, they like to have the UK accents. We have a variety of them. 2 weeks ago, we had Chris Smith from Scotland, and hopefully Michael speaks a little more slowly than Chris did, because you really have to pay attention to those Scots. But Michael's here to share with us all of his expertise. He's a great speaker. He's going to be a great guest. We're very much looking forward to this, Michael. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kobe to do his magic.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Great Employees Matter. And welcome, as you heard, we have a great guest. The name of the show today is called Beyond the Blueprint, Creating Your Own Path in a World Full of Expectations, which I love. And we'll get into that about the journey. But I want to first start by saying, please, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share the content if you like it. We're growing. We appreciate you guys. There's some of you guys that show up here every week. We appreciate the engagement. You know, it's really hard getting this off the ground and going. We're doing two businesses, but we really appreciate you. So with that, I want to get right to the guest and start with the questioning process. So can you start, Michael, by telling us a little bit about yourself? We know that you're from not far from London, across the pond there, but tell us a little bit about your upbringing and growing up in school and things like that. Tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you to you both. Pleasure to be here. So my name's Michael Glassick. As you quite rightly said, I'm a career change coach. So I mainly help people with changing their careers, and that's informed by my own kind of past, which I'll dive into. And apologies for the kind of facial hair. For those who probably are quite aware, it's Movember at the minute, which a lot of people will kind of shave and keep the moustache to try and raise money for mental health, for kind of preventing of men's suicide and stuff like that. So I'm happy to look a bit silly for a good cause. So you'll have to forgive me for that. So to your question, Kobe, in terms of the background of myself, so I kind of, obviously I'm mixed race, so my mum is from Jamaica, and my dad was born in East London, so he's kind of white British, and I was born in London. And from there kind of rose up and kind of moved out to Essex, where I am, like you said, an hour from London. But essentially, my career started mainly in the NHS, so the National Health Service in the UK. So I worked there for roughly 6 years in project management. So I started off like any graduate, like a graduate scheme, and then kind of year on year, I kind of got promoted like 4 times over the 6 years, and then up as a project manager, managing projects across Mid and South Essex. And for all intents and purposes, I was doing really well, had a good salary, had a nice title and all the rest of it. But wasn't very happy, if I'm honest. I think as I grew, I could see a misalignment with the kind of role I was doing and how it made me feel. And that really, the catalyst for me, COVID was a catalyst for a lot of people changing their careers. But my dad actually got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I'm an only child. So that was a massive, big point for me, really. And it might sound silly saying this, but I'm thankful that so early in my career, I had something like that to actually reflect and actually realise, what do I want to spend my days, my months, my years doing. So that was the big change, and that's what led me to coaching now.
Wow. So it kind of changed you because of just the environment. The environment caused you to have to do something different. What did you do before, if you don't mind me asking?
Before the NHS?
Yes.
Yeah. So I went into I did accounting and finance and swapped into business management as part of my degree. So I was all about getting into corporate and kind of went into the financial world. So I did a lot of financial administration and stuff like that. Very quickly, as much as I grew up thinking money's the answer to everything, I very quickly realised it's not the answer to me.
Right. Right.
But don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with earning a pound note. It gives you, I suppose, freedom to a certain extent in life. But the kind of situation, the kind of company, and the environment, wasn't best suited for myself. So from there, I actually went into the arts, so the creative, the arts. I was there as more of a business intern. So I came with more of a business head to kind of generate footfall and kind of generate profit for then the charity side of the business. And then that's when I slowly pivoted into the NHS. And then from there, I've kind of never really looked back, really. I've managed to manage teams, manage projects all across regions and counties. And then obviously with my dad, that's where my kind of journey into coaching started from there.
Was there anybody encouraging you or trying to get you to do a certain thing in your career or not, or go down a certain path?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think you've touched upon something I talk a lot about. It's like society's expectations. So the expectation of society, you have to kind of go out. You got to have a Lamborghini by the time you're 25. You got to be a millionaire. You got to have your flash Rolex and all the rest of it. But in that is also subculture, which you'll probably kind of understand quite well. So in terms of subculture, equally as well, certain cultures in terms of race and heritage also kind of, you're either a lawyer or a banker or this or a failure,
Yeah. So, go ahead.
No. So I was fortunate with the humble upbringing from my mum and dad, that from there, I suppose, as long as I was in a professional career and I was in a safe place, my parents were happy for me to do what I wanted. So I would say they worked for survival, and they gave me the opportunity to kind of pursue what I wanted to do.
Oh, that's awesome. So success. How do you how do you how do you define success in a world where society, family, your friends, your peers often dictate what it's supposed to look like? How do you define that?
Yeah. Well, I think both you and Jimmy and even Lloyd will probably have a point to raise, and it'd be interesting to know what your version of success is as well, and that maybe how that's changed throughout your kind of careers. But for me, you've hit the nail on the head. I think for me, success is deemed by what success is for me, and not for society, family, or peers. As you said, alluded to, your family might say, well, if you're not a lawyer, you're not an engineer, or or a doctor, you're not successful. And for me, I think the more we can kind of turn inwards and realise, I suppose, regardless of the outcome, if I've tried something, say in 3, 5, 10 years time, am I happy with what I've done, as opposed to kind of pursuing someone else's goals? And even if I've been successful in that goal, am I still happy, I suppose, with the result and how it's made me feel? So a lot of what I do, even my social media, I always say I treat social media as like a library. So rather than looking at people, I suppose, like every single account is like a book. And I'm very mindful of the content that I take in from social media now. So I cultivate my library, I cultivate my social media. So if I watch somebody and they're saying these goals is the Rolex, the materialistic possessions and all the rest of it, I will unfollow, I will kind of deactivate that person, because I want to see social media as something that empowers me, not kind of makes me feel negative or kind of takes things away from me. So all of those subtle things I mentioned all feeds into my own version of success. I'm very mindful how I cultivate that, including like social media and the things I see every day.
Man, that's great. I'm going to ask one more question. I can go on with you for hours. I can see that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask one more question. What roles does mindset play in redefining one's career and life goals, and how can someone begin to cultivate a mindset that encourages them to grow?
Yeah. I would go as far as say mindset. A lot of people focus on competence and skills and a lot of that. I think mindset is 90% of kind of changing and taking action, and especially changing careers. For me, the single-handed biggest thing, we always hear the word confidence, imposter syndrome, we hear these buzzwords quite a lot. my mantra in life is to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Now, that will mean different things to different people. But for me, I remember when I first joined in the NHS, and I had to lead a project meeting with kind of external and internal stakeholders. And to put it politely, I was rather nervous. So I won't swear, but I was rather nervous. But after I've doing that once, 3, 5, 10 times, you get more, what I say, comfortable with the uncomfortable. So that kind of builds another skill. It builds that kind of that muscle, that mindset muscle, to then go on and conquer new things. Then the next thing, I got asked to do a radio interview on behalf of the company. Now, again, you can imagine how I felt. But after doing 1, 2, 3 of them, after doing 5, 10, 15 podcasts, again, you get to the point where you're actually excited to attend a podcast. Whereas before, I would have run the other way. So for me, Kobe, you've hit the nail on the head. Mindset for me, truly. Of course, you need to have some level of competence. You can't just walk in and manage a FTSE 100 or a massive corporate kind of multinational company like that. But mindset for me is 90% of achieving things.
Awesome, man. I'm gonna kick it over to Jimmy.
Oh, first, I would like to say thank you for some clarification. When I first heard that your background was in the NHS, I'm thinking, well, you must be from the North Highland sector of the UK. And I had no idea what NHS was. So thank you for that. And then I'll ask for an additional clarification then. You are an ICF approved coach. And so when I wrote down my notes to, things that I could ask Michael while I was on the podcast, I said, well, ICF must mean incredibly compassionate friend. I suspect that maybe it isn't. So can you explain what an ICF coach is?
Well, I'm hoping, Jimmy, I'm that as well, to be honest.
You already are. Thank you.
I know. I much prefer that title to whatever I'm about to tell you. For me, the ICF stands for the International Coaching Federation. So there are mainly, I would say, 3 main bodies. There's the AC, Association of Coaching, the ICF, what I've just explained, and the EMCC, the European Mentoring Coaching Council. Those are really the 3 main big bodies. And if you think of accountancy, you've got CIMA and SIPFA. Those are the chartered bodies for accountants. This is the closest thing I would say for coaches. Now, this was quite important for me. I'm quite happy with my management and kind of leadership experience, if I'm honest. But the coaching industry for me, I suppose, Jimmy, is growing and is booming, and that's for 2 good reasons. I think now it's not just available to executives; it's available to the masses, and people are realizing how powerful it can be. But with that, attract certain types of people who feel like they can make a quick buck and can go on to a trend of an industry, and that's why you're seeing coaches kind of spring up anywhere. Now, I think that's a good problem because it shows that obviously coaching is getting more accessible worldwide. But for me, having a credible framework behind me and going through actual training, formalized training, to then call myself a coach was quite important for me personally. And kind of the ICF has a kind of a code of ethics, has key structures that you have to have your coaching sessions follow. And probably the biggest one of the code of ethics is confidentiality. So we might talk about values, but probably one of my biggest values is around integrity. And that goes hand in hand with confidentiality. If you really strip it back, coaching, a stranger is paying you to talk about something that's ultimately making themselves vulnerable. If you're not approaching that conversation with integrity and confidentiality, you're not serving that person. And I plan. People always laugh at me, but my goal is to coach a day a week when I'm 80 years old. Now, if I'm not serving with integrity, that's not going to happen. I plan to do this for decades, not for just a couple of years. It's a really, really good question.
Okay. Couple quick questions before we hand it over to Lloyd for his very probing questions. One question is
our guest, Jimmy.
I'll do a run if you're not careful.
When people consider career change, it's my experience that oftentimes that happens as a result of something negative, right? That they have a bad experience in the workplace, they get terminated for whatever reason, whether justified or not. There can be a move, the family needs to move, and so they have to adjust to that. So how does one initiate the conversation within themselves to consider a career change?
Yeah, really good question. So there's a lot of actually studies between the biggest motivators for change, and you've kind of, I suppose, alluded to one that I wouldn't suggest people get into a habit of this, but fear, I suppose, and kind of a negative emotion can actually often be a bigger driver and a bigger kind of motivator to create a change as opposed to success or a positive emotion. So what you've said is spot on. I think I kind of quickly mention about COVID. COVID was a massive catalyst for people to change careers. Myself, obviously, in all intents and purposes, was a negative situation with kind of my dad and the diagnosis. But I suppose I was very fortunate. I didn't do this overnight. You know, I'm a human being, and it still affects me. That's my father at the end of the day. But I saw the silver lining in the situation and used that energy, whether it's positive or negative, to push me to a different place. So to your question about understanding, I think for me, you will very clearly see a change perhaps in your behavior, and things are very linked. So your emotions are often linked to your behaviors, and your behaviors are often linked to your actions. So you'll see a bit of a ripple effect, I would say. So people who are experiencing what you're just saying, I would argue something changes in terms of emotions. Now, we can make it a bit more jovial and call it the Sunday scaries. So we get to Sunday afternoon, and we're not perhaps looking forward to Monday morning coming round, and we get the Sunday scaries, and we're not too sure about what that is come about and why the reason is. Often those emotions will lead to behaviours, like I said, in terms of how we kind of show up in the workplace. I was lucky, and I've had a coach, and I still have a coach to this day. So I suppose that tells you about how much I believe in coaching myself. But I had a coach to help me kind of voice kind of how I was feeling in terms of my emotions and behaviours, and kind of nip it in the bud. And not, you know, I like to see myself as quite a positive person in terms of conversations and the work I bring. But I could see if I was kept in that situation, how that could potentially lead out. So there's lots of free resources, and I'm quite keen to like help people take free steps themselves. You don't have to pay loads of money to kind of start this journey yourself. I have a free values exercise, so if people are interested, I can share that with people. But there's many you can access online, and for me, that is often the first thing I will signpost people to, is because values for me aren't just pretty words on a piece of paper. They are the core motivators and kind of decide the directions you take in life. So if someone can understand their values, when you then understand if that's aligned to their workplace, for me, that can give you some actual practical next steps to take there and then.
And where can they get your free assets?
Yeah, of course. So it's simply on my website, so michaelglassickcoaching.com. There's a resources. But I'm more than happy. I can download it and kind of share it with you chaps to share with your team. It's something I like to. Someone you might have heard of. There's a chap called Alex Hormozy, who's quite big in America. But he talks about kind of share the answers and sell the implementation. And I think that's a really good way to think about business. I like to share insight, because if someone's basically took some insight that I've shared and actually has a mini change, they might think, crikey, I've had a change already just from this free piece of material. God knows what's going to happen when I actually kind of enlist these services and help ask them to support me. So I'm very much about sharing practical ideas with people. Hopefully that makes change in their lives. And then from there, who knows, you know, they might kind of enlist my services in the future.
Interesting. Second question is, does the ICF distinguish between mentoring and coaching, or do you consider it to be synonymous?
Now, this is a great question. So the ICF does separate, but I would also say this is something I experience a lot in terms of UK, US. So sometimes people, and I find in the UK, it feels relatively clear in terms of the difference from coaching and mentoring. So if you mind, so for me, therapy, the three main kind of principles. Therapy is focusing on how past events affect you in your present day. Coaching and mentoring are similar, where they focus on where you are currently, where do you want to go to in the future, and how can we navigate the challenges, the issues to get to that place. Now, the key difference for me and the ICF is mentoring is much more directive. So perhaps I tell you what to do, whereas coaching is much more what we call an equal relationship. So it's much more consultative. I will basically ask you open-ended questions, and I do three key things. I guide, support, and challenge. So So I don't tell you what to do. I guide you along the journey. I support you. I celebrate your wins when you have them. But equally, I challenge you from an objective point of view. So for me, rather than say you want to go, you want to be an accounting associate, you want to change your career, Jimmy, and rather than me saying, right, okay, given what you've shared with me, Jimmy, and what you want to do, I suggest you go down the SEMA route as a chartered management accountant. This is the steps you're going to take. Off you go. Whereas with coaching, I would ask you kind of skills. I'll probably give you some exercises, and I would get you to the point of answering your own question. Now, the reason why there's a place for all of them, by the way, I don't think one principle is better than the other. But the thing I like about coaching is I believe it's much more empowering, and it doesn't mean you're reliant on me. Throughout the whole coaching process, I'm giving you tools, I'm giving you techniques, I'm changing your mindset, helping you change your own mindset, like Kobe said. So that post-coaching, you're more equipped to deal with the world and deal with the challenges you face. So those would say the key differences are for me for therapy, coaching, and then mentoring.
Thank you. Is it fair to say then that, or to assume that your coaching tends to be one-on-one, and that in the UK there are also business consultants that work more closely with the employer, with the business, than with the employee?
Yeah, I think that that's generally true. I would say. I think coaching obviously can be one-on-one, could be group coaching. It depends on the topic, depends on the situation. Consultants, yes, very much. You pay me a fee, I come in, I deliver for you. I do the implementation for you, for sure. But for me, with coaching, yeah, it's much more equal level relationship is the key way. Whereas mentoring is much more an unequal relationship, and there's a bit of a power dynamic. Again, not saying it's a bad thing. And there are certain situations I've enlisted mentors myself. So I think it's just understanding they're all tools in a toolkit, and depending on where you are. So, for instance, I have a partner in the therapy space. So sometimes if someone comes to me and they keep referring to past events, I will often refer them, and I kind of make it known to them. I say, "Oh, you've mentioned this a couple of times. What we're going to do. How can we move past this? Going forward, looking forward to your future goal." And if for whatever reason they can't go past that, I will refer them to a therapist. Obviously, I know they can access whoever they want to focus on how that past event, perhaps trauma, could be something else is affecting them. And then once they're then ready, I would then continue coaching them with them. Because for me, at the end of the day, and again, I've referenced this a couple of times, if I want to be in this for the long haul, I want to serve people with what's most beneficial to them. And it's not just kind of keep telling them coaching sessions and say, okay, I've done 12 sessions, I've got my money, off you go. That doesn't help people. So, who knows, I might branch out more into that space. I already kind of occupy both a coaching and mentoring space. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's important to give people the right tools for the situation they're in.
Good. Thank you for that. Arguably, the most intelligent person in our group is Lloyd. He is a lifelong attorney or barrister in your world. And so that's why we always have this sector where we turn things over to Lloyd, and Kobe and I hold our breath and let him ask his question. And so this is the time when that happens. So Lloyd, the stage is yours.
And arguably was the operative word there.
Yeah, let me be the first to argue against that. It's my pleasure to meet you, and it's obvious that mental health is something that you are concerned about. You may have heard that within the last week or so, we went to the polls here. I think we elected a new PTA person, or I'm not quite sure who we elected, but I think we elected maybe a new president at the church. I'm not quite sure what we were voting for. The thing that got to me is that you indicated that you go through and basically you call all the negativity from your social media, those people that are not your friends, those people that drag you down. Our country, our people have never been more divided. It has gotten so bad over here, and you couple that with the anonymity of the internet. And I was just wondering, is there special advice that you give to those who you're mentoring or to those who you're coaching who may be brought down by these external type forces where people who were our friends and people who we knew don't even talk to each other. It has gotten really vicious here, and I know you went through some of that with Boris Johnson, but I don't think to the level that we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, your framing of your question is superb. So I have to give credit where credit's due, Lloyd. So there you go. There you go.
This is a non-political show.
It is.
Yes, you might want to give Lloyd the memo on that. Yeah,
We give him memos all the time.
He's a barrister.
You actually have to be able to read to get the memos. They haven't taught me that yet.
I like you, Lloyd.
Back to you, Michael.
We're going to get on well, I think. So, yeah.
And I'm also the one in need of most coaching. So,
Well, you'll be. It might sound silly, Lloyd, but for me, the people giving the biggest challenge are the ones that I enjoy the most. And wider to that point, I think there's firstly something that I kind of say, and it's hard. A lot of the stuff I say, and what I mentioned with my situation with my dad, I want to be very clear. Like, these things take time. It's not. I'm no perfectionist. I'm not perfect. I'm human. I will fall into negative states, and I will judge people and judge others. And whether it's kind of coaching, whether it's kind of faith, it allows me to be humble and kind of go back to this center play. So I think that's the key thing for me to realize is, if we fall into these situations, that there's nothing wrong with that. We are human beings at the end of the day, and we will make mistakes, and we will inherently make mistakes for the rest of our life. And if I stop making mistakes, it's probably because I'm not stretching myself. So that's the first thing and foremost that I would share. But I truly believe this, Lloyd, and I don't know if you do as well, or share this view. I honestly believe that I can learn something from every single person I meet. Now, and there's something that I've got this principle from, obviously, Tony Robbins, who I don't introduce his name, and it might be something I don't want to do. So to be clear, like, I might learn something from meeting someone, and I learn actually that's a trait, there's a thing that I don't want to do. But I truly believe I can learn something from every individual I meet, and I want to know where people are coming from. And perhaps there's no reason why I'm in the coaching world, and I love human psychology and how the brain works and how society impacts us. But I want to know the reason and the background for your argument, and that will do one of two things. It will either strengthen my own, because it will challenge me and make me realize, or it will make me change my mind. And dare I say, it's not a bad thing every now and again to change our mind on things. So for me, I would look at every single one of us as human beings, and I love human beings as much as the turmoil and the kind of trials and tribulations this world experiences. I love humans at a foundational level. And I would look at, when I'm having a conversation with this person, what can I learn from this individual? So I'm not focusing on me, I'm focusing on them. And for me, I'm not saying that's going to be a silver bullet. You've asked a very complex question, and of course it's going to require a complex answer. But for me, straight away, that gets me out of my own head and thinking, what can I learn from you? And that allows me naturally to be less defensive. So that would be my point. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are as well, though.
Well, Michael, my mother always told me that I was not useless, that I could always be a bad example. So I guess from me, you would learn that I'm a bad example and don't do what I do, and that's what would be part of it. I wanted to talk a little more about what you were saying about being able to learn from everybody. How do you deal with that in coaching when your first reaction is, when you hear something which is negative or completely opposite, that you want to run the other way? How do you train somebody to stay and try and get the good?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the fact that someone's felt that is something to celebrate, because whether we want to be super cutthroat and we don't, or we want to embrace our emotions, whatever this is, it's all data. So regardless of how you feel, especially if you have a strong reaction to something, again, I would say that ties to one of your values. And again, when I say about values, pardon me, I talk about the core components of who you are as a person. So if something really triggers you and you want to run the other way, my first question would be to explore that, basically. And I'll be saying, what is it about that situation? And again, this is why therapists have therapists, coaches have coaches. You know, we can't. Yes, we have all the skills, we have the tools, and we're always learning. So I say we have all the skills, but we're always adding to that toolbox. But equally, I don't think, oh, I'm so good, I've done a qualification, I can coach myself. I still also rely on other people to help support me, and I have my own kind of supportive circle. So for me, that's the key piece for me, is if someone is experiencing that, I would actually celebrate it, and I'll say, what is this now going to tell us, and how can we now learn from this situation or this event?
Okay, my last questions to you are my rapid fire questions.
Okay, I'll try
So
to keep it short.
these are rapid fire, and I just want to know the first thing that comes to your mind. And these are all easy.
This is dangerous.
Oh, very dangerous. I assure you. That's why they usually don't give me the microphone, and they make me wait till last. Half the time the guests hang up in the middle, and that's the end of the show. It's rather embarrassing for my friends.
Wow.
Are you
Let him go first, Jimmy.
are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
I don't think I am, but I don't have a choice.
Okay. Did you get the Red Fox lab or the chocolate lab?
Oh, great question. Haven't got the dog yet, but I Jess wants the chocolate lab. I want the Red Fox lab. I think I've gotten her coming over to me, so we're hopefully going to get a Red Fox lab.
Okay. Well, I'm a Weimaraner guy myself.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I love the Weimaraners, and they're great.
Yeah.
Next thing is that you like long walks. I have to tell you that my greatest fear from the zombie apocalypse is all that running. That would just, the zombies wouldn't kill me. It's all that running that would kill me.
I've got a solution for you. You give up the ghost early and you join them. You can't beat them, you join them. Okay.
I have to, because I see that you're a gamer. What's your favorite game?
So at the minute, I did something. This is now a symbol of this coaching journey, and it might sound silly. I used to do Warhammer. So Warhammer is I think it's quite well wide. So hopefully your viewers and yourself are aware of Warhammer. It's like a tabletop game with miniatures, and you kind of roll dice and stuff like that. And I did it as a youngster, and then when I got to university, I just stopped because I thought it wasn't cool anymore. I didn't like, I'll get judged. And then I swear to God, once I got to coach him, I thought, why do I care what people think about what I'm doing? If it's something I enjoy, it challenges my mind, it's a way to kind of decompress, I'll do what the hell I want to do. And I've done it ever since. So I absolutely love it. It's an amazing community. And it's basically fantasy chess for anybody who doesn't know what Warhammer is.
Okay, I got two questions left. The first is in two parts. Take your choice. You choose which one of these two you want to answer. Okay. What is Short Matt Bowles' team, or what the heck is coriander?
Coriander. You've got an American word for coriander. I can't remember. If you type it in coriander, it'll come up quickly for you. So it's like a herb, basically.
Okay.
You might recognize it if you have it. Some people feel like it tastes like soap. So it's a herb. Is it Cointreau? Is that what you call it? You have an American word for it.
Okay, we will look that up.
Yes, yeah. So, and Short Matt Bowles simply is
cilantro.
Cilantro.
Oh, okay.
It. Yeah. So it's a herb. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the bunnies eat that, so they're happy with it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then last question. This is easy, very easy, right off the top of your head. What does America have to do in order to finally field a good World Cup soccer team?
So there's one key piece, Lloyd. Is call it what it's bloody meant to be called. It's football.
No, I'm sorry. If we call it what it's meant to be called, we would call that several hours of nobody scoring. Which, if I want to see nobody score, I can go down to the local pub and watch my mates.
Have you watched baseball, Lloyd?
No, for exactly the same reason. Baseball is good in the third inning to the seventh inning with a lot of beer in between.
Yeah. I've got family in Canada, Toronto. So my team are the Blue Jays. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pull us back to center,
Please,
get us back on track. Yeah, as you know, Michael, in our strategy session, I told you that this is just a conversation. So the three of us don't get together and compose questions and
Mhm.
predetermine what we're going to ask. But Lloyd and I do think a lot alike on a lot of topics. And going back to the values question, you had mentioned the importance of values um, in your coaching process, right? Or process.
Yeah.
And so, what happens? And I know you touched on this a little bit in your response to Lloyd. What happens if the person that you're coaching simply has negative values and is lacking integrity? Do you continue to attempt to coach them, or is there a point when you say that this just is not working out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I haven't to this day, and I've probably done close to I've definitely done over 200 odd hours now of coaching. I haven't had someone who is say uncoachable, and I've said, no, you know what, I can't deal with this negativity. Off you pop. I've had enough. So I haven't actually to this day had that, and I look forward to that because that's going to be another challenge, I suppose, on my journey. But for me, when you say negative values, it's interesting. I suppose, and I think I'm being facetious a little bit here, Jimmy. But for me, the negative values is, I suppose, it's a subjective thing, isn't it? So who is
Sure.
it negative? In whose eyes is it negative? I suppose is the first bit. And I appreciate that's been a bit facetious, but for me, it's understanding, I suppose, the reasoning behind that value and how that then shows up in their life. So for me to put it into practice, so we talk about these words, and this is why I say, for me, it's not just pretty words on a piece of paper. So for me, my four core values are freedom, fulfillment, integrity, and lifelong learning. Now, if I was, in terms of if I was coaching yourself and I was, or coaching myself, let's say for this example, I was going to go through those values. How do they show up in my life currently? So freedom for me is physical and financial freedom, and also autonomy. So financial freedom is important to me. No doubt at some point my dad will go into care. I want to support my mum with that kind of financial burden. So that's quite important to me. Physical freedom, whether it's remote work, so I can kind of work in Scotland, work in South Africa. Like I like that remote element, and autonomy. For me, that links with freedom. I like to be not necessarily in control, but I like to have the kind of power in terms of the direction of the work I do. So that's important. So if I'm seeking a role or in my personal life, I would like to see how is that playing out. Fulfillment. For me, I get to wake up every day and essentially inspire people to do what inspires them. Now, for me, there's not many more fulfilling things that kind of, I suppose, tick my box. So that's one core thing for me, and hence why I worked in the NHS for 6 years in healthcare. You can kind of see the trend there.
Sure.
Integrity. I've spoken enough about integrity and how important it is for me. And then lifelong learning. You wouldn't be in this profession if you weren't interested in learning. You don't do a coaching course and then you go, right, that's it. I can coach for the next 60 years. It's the start of your journey, not the end of your journey. I'm sure each and every one of you will kind of be familiar with that. So the reason why I share that is because now when I'm looking at roles, and values do change over life. I wouldn't say they change every day, but they can change after big kind of life circumstances, or say 5 or so years often. But for me, I'd be interrogating someone's, say, negative values and saying, how do they show up in their life? How do they look to kind of drive, I suppose, to future decisions? Perhaps the goal. Often people come to coaching with a goal in mind. And by interrogating that whole situation, usually we'll get some quite positive steps coming out of that. So for me, that's how I put values into practice, I suppose, and how people and your listeners can do it themselves.
Excellent response. We consider those gems. All four of those we will record as gems provided by Michael Glassick. The last question before I turn it back over to Kobe. Is age a factor when it comes to career change, or how much is age a factor aside from the traditional? As you get older, you reconsider what you're going to do. But do you find that nowadays are younger potential clients of yours more inclined to be desirous of or open to change just because of the climate?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So the first thing to say, and I said it in jest, I suppose, to you previously, but for me, age is just a number. I think what's more important is the circumstances that surround you. So one of those circumstances could be mindset. So sometimes it doesn't matter if you're 20 or 60 or whatever it is, you might be stuck in your ways. So the age is irrelevant. Sometimes with age, often as a general trend, there will be more financial constraints and more things to take in consideration. So not always the case, but often the younger you are, you have less financial constraints, children, house, property, mortgages, etc. So those are things we have to, of course, I focus heavily on the mindset and self-awareness of understanding who you are first. But then when we come to the path and actually understanding key opportunities or careers you want to pivot into, we need to take the reality in consideration. It would be silly not to. So apart from that, for me, to your latter part of your question, I would agree. So I think more people, in terms of we go into one job and that's a job for our life, and I think my dad had 3 jobs in his entire life. It's more portfolio careers. So it's not even the fact that you change careers every year or 2 years to progress. So actually, if you stood in a career for 5-10 years, perhaps in my father's age, you were rewarded for that. That loyalty was rewarded. Whereas now, when you move careers, you're actually rewarded for moving careers. You're rewarded for changing roles. Now, not even that, it's then gone to another extreme, which is partly what I do now, is now not just moving every year, it's actually having portfolio careers. So you have 3-4 different roles, 3-4 different pots of income that then make your kind of, I suppose, pot right now. So that's kind of where we are now. And I think there's things, and this will make you chuckle. So we all know midlife crisis, but there's a common phenomenon called the quarter life crisis, which will probably make you chuckle. So as it says on the tin, people, when they get to that 25 rough age, and funny enough, this is when I actually made my transition, you spend your whole life being told what to do. But then when you get to that age of 25, usually say you finish university at 21, that's 3 or 4 years you've got into the workplace, you maybe got into a junior managerial level, and for once you're calling the shots, you're not being told what to do. And often, rather than following your family or society's goals or success, you finally come to a realization of actually, what do I want to do? So I do find that quite common now with the clients.
Very interesting. Kobe?
Yeah. I want to ask a question, and then I want to actually get to the comment section, because we got a couple of questions in there as well. So I'm going to start with my question, though. How do you help clients identify what truly inspires them, especially if they've spent a long time in life following everybody else's blueprint for success?
So how do you help people, and then was it follow things that inspire them?
How do you help people identify what truly inspires them?
Perfect, thank you. So for me, the 3 kind of key stages I kind of go through coaching with people is kind of broadly identity, path, action. So identity, before, a lot of people are like, I need to change, I need to get a career, etc. So for me, I focus on identity, which covers mainly kind of values, skills, strengths, preferences of work, and a few other bits and bobs, but understanding about them. We spend our whole life following other people's goals and other people's kind of version of success that we don't actually know what we ultimately want to do ourselves. So by understanding that stuff, and I'm not telling people, I'm kind of allowing people to get to their own place, which is actually quite empowering for themselves. Once they have an understanding of what their values are, and again, then they realize they're not just pretty words on a piece of paper, these actually drive the decisions I make in life. They understand what their key skills and strengths are objectively. So I'm not going to, I suppose, just being their cheerleader. I'm kind of doing objective exercises to understand these. They then understand their preferences of work and how that might impact their life. So obviously we have career goals. We have to understand how that impacts our wider life as well. For me, a lot of that work leads them to probably a good place of understanding what they want to do. So I always believe the person has the answer themselves. I'm just there to facilitate the conversation. I don't know any more than the person sat in front of me. And I truly believe that. And I think that's what probably is my superpower. That's helped me coach people well. So for me, that's a key way to then help people then understand what inspires them, or I suppose what they want to get out of.
I love that answer, man. I think that we identify, as far as the styles and how we coach, everything that you said to me, in my opinion, has been spot on. Starting with the person, understanding what they are. They have all the answers. Your approach, I just truly love everything about it, man. So it's a perfect match. But I want to get to the comment section and start going through some of the people that's come in. We do have people that come in. Thank you, everybody that's in here. I see we got some likes, some subscribes in the building. Thank you to everybody. I first want to give a shout out to our business partner for BCJK. Chris is in the building. He's also a coach himself for Chris Smith Fit. So hopefully you guys will get to see some stuff coming from him soon. But he's just in here doing a lot of banter, and
I saw the Scottish.
I want to give him a shout out.
Yeah, I saw the Scottish remarks. I did see them.
Yeah, he's funny. He's hilarious. So first question though is from Sachiko, and she says, "What are some of the most common barriers people face when trying to create their own path, and how do you guide them to overcome those?" And these came earlier, so you may have covered this a little bit, but just go ahead and satisfy her questions if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the. Yeah, I think I've covered this in elements, but I suppose ultimately the key bit for me, number one thing is around confidence. They might use different words, different semantics, but confidence is when it comes up. It actually surprises people when I say that. People often think money or financial constraints is usually the one. It's not. Usually it's mindset. It's usually around confidence. And I experience it myself. So even simple things. So I was like a project manager in the corporate world and I was doing quite well. Even when I started to change my LinkedIn profile, so I was more seen externally as a coach rather than a project manager, that drew some remarks from senior leadership people. I'm lucky I've got a beautiful and loving wife, who supported me through the time, because I have my own self-doubt, I have my own insecurities, and I have someone to kind of help check me, I suppose, on that path. So confidence is the biggest one for me, and the single biggest factor. And I'm sure my mindset might change in the future. But currently, for me, what I believe is the biggest number one factor to help with confidence is to put yourself in a different, stretch yourself, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And it's 1%. So you don't kind of scare yourself and kind of chuck yourself in the deep zone. You go, what would be 1% closer to my goal? And you do that every week of every year. And that's 52 weeks in a year. That's 52 actions. And if you think how far you've come in the last year, who's to say you can't come further than that, going forward? So for me, become comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Oh, I love it. And then we got another question from Mr. Dale Shelton. It says, I enjoy your integrity and honest levels you have spoke about. My question, did some of those qualities come from a spiritual background? That's a great question.
Yeah, that I love this question. So I'm going to continue with the theme now. I'm glad you thought I was honest. I've fooled you because I'm glad you think I'm on it, and I will continue with that and be vulnerable, I suppose. So for me, first and foremost, my I suppose childhood heroes, I forgot the term for it, but my childhood heroes, I suppose, were my parents. So like my mum is the oldest of 9. She moved from Jamaica. She looked after my great grandmother. She's scared of the dark. She worked nights on top of her work to kind of allow me to have a normal life. I spoke with love, and that was it. My dad, by all intents and purposes, he would say this. He wasn't the brightest kind of person. He was a postman, then a messenger. Back in the day when they used to deliver post, not by email but by hand. Then a receptionist, then a senior receptionist in the bank. So basically, they're grafters. And what that teaches you is you can't replace hard work, and it's taught me to be humble. So the biggest thing is my parents for me. Then recently, in the last, I would say 2-ish years, or maybe longer, 3-ish years, I've more delved into spirituality. So I firstly got into kind of Buddhism. And the reason why I got into Buddhism is because a lot of the philosophies of Buddhism, and I'm going to grossly oversimplify this, is around kind of world peace and kind of treating others how you wish to be treated. But what I realize only now is the big things I was drawn to Buddhism is there was no God. So there's no God in Buddhism. Right. Now, what I've realized since now kind of maybe converting to more Christianity is the reason why I was initially drew to Buddhism is I didn't like someone else having control of me. I like to control the controllables. My parents have worked incredibly hard their whole life for survival, to allow me the opportunity to do stuff for fun and for freedom, dare I say it. So control and hard work is obviously very important to me. But then when I had that realization, that self-awareness, I thought, okay, this is data. What does this say about me? Perhaps what can I, I suppose, relinquish control for? So yes, since then I've kind of I go to church relatively, every couple of weeks. I kind of I have a kind of minister that I kind of speak to occasionally to recite things to. But yeah, I don't like to push things on other people. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm kind of working through now. So I appreciate your question.
Awesome. Well, Jimmy, go ahead and take them to shameless plugs, I guess.
I will do that. I did want to mention that the Dale, who is a loyal listener, also has family that hails from London.
Oh,
So
wow.
a little shout out to them. And so this will lead into our what we call the SSP portion of our podcast, the shameless self-promotion. But I would begin that. Well, first I would preface it with, when we first announced that we were going to podcast with Michael Glassick, we have at least one member of the audience who is a huge footballer who got so excited because they knew of this Australian footballer named Michael Glassick, and he couldn't believe that he was going to be on our show. And so for all of you that don't know, this is not the same Michael Glassick. So I'll preface it with that. But in segueing into the shameless self-promotion, how do you find clients, or how do they find you? It's an interesting balance when people come to that realization that they do want to change. So do you go out and actively look for clients, or do you just have them come to you, and that's the segue? How do people reach you?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, my biggest goal in life, ignore everything I've said, is to be the one and only true Michael Glassick. So, so hopefully, say in a year's time, if we reconvene, Jimmy, you won't have that problem. So yeah, but that's because I funny enough, I see that myself. So I go, oh crikey, am I Australian?
I think you should be Michael Glassick's coach.
It's true. That is true. I could help with the mindset, maybe not the technical skills, but yeah. So to answer your question, I think there's three key parts. So for me, it's associates, social media, word of mouth. So for me, the long-term goal, as I would argue any business should probably be aiming for, is to go to a word of mouth business. Now, these things don't happen overnight. Thankfully, I'm not gonna planning to do this overnight. But for me, that's the long-term goal. So with word of mouth, I do find a percentage of my clients. When I coach them, they will refer people, and I have like a bit of a referral scheme to kind of say thank you for people who do that. But that has happened more than I thought it would, and I say that again to be honest, because you always feel like you're trying your best. You kind of do continuous CPD, but you never really know the impact. But it's obviously had quite some impact on people. So I do get quite a few referrals from people who coach that I've coached. The second bit is a kind of a presence on social media. I wouldn't say this is going to be like your massive kind of thing that's going to happen overnight. This is working in the background, but by having social media, people know you exist, quite frankly. By being on things like this and doing things I enjoy and speaking to people who can challenge me and kind of have like-minded conversations with, I enjoy it. And then it couples that in terms of social media presence. And through that, I find more bigger companies have actually approached me as opposed to one-to-one clients. It's more sometimes my own podcast, when I dive into more kind of specific subjects, that sometimes then resonates with a challenge someone's facing. So it's a mix of those two, is that social media piece. And then the final piece is associate roles. So I have a couple of associate roles, so the kind of three key main ones. I have one with creatives and artists, so in the kind of the world of art. So that's helping people either grow their practice or often deal with kind of confidence, because art is very much a part of them. They're selling a part of them in terms of their practice and moving past that barrier. The second one is the military. So I support an organisation called the Forces Transition Group, led by John and Mandy Stevenson. Amazing people, really humble, and I kind of really connected with them as soon as I met them. And that's helping people transition from the military into civvy street, as we call it, so civilian life. So that's quite a rewarding role that I quite enjoy. And then the final one is with LHH, Lee Hecht Harrison, who are part of the Adecco Group, who your listeners might have heard of. They're more of a global firm. And that is more in outplacement. And outplacement is simply when people are experiencing kind of say redundancies or changes in their organization. Could even be retirement. And big organizations will very positively and kind of kindly will pay for programs to support their people that are outplacing, so are leaving the organization. And as a consultant, I will help support them. So through those 3 pillars, through the associate roles, obviously I deliver good work themselves, but then people see me through the word of mouth, so actually delivering good stuff that obviously people refer me, and then having the social media presence across those 3. That's mainly, I'm not saying that's the best way, but that's my current way, and that's how I've kind of generated people.
Okay, so then if you could share with us your social media platforms for your podcast and your website. You mentioned earlier michaelglassickcoaching.com.
Yes, yeah, of course. So I've seen Kobe's popped it up a couple of times, so thank you for doing that. So yeah, simply michaelglassickcoaching.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, probably the 2 places I'm most kind of present. So Michael Glassick, Michael, and as you can see there, Glassick is Glassock. And the key thing I always say is, if I'm not the right person for you, whether actually I realize it's more mentoring, therapy, or actually just another coach, because I'm a coach doesn't mean I'm the right coach for you. I will most probably signpost you to the right place. So for me, I love the fact the coaching industry is booming. There's lots of opportunities out there, and I just want people to experience, I suppose, the benefits that I experience to this day. So yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and go out on the limb, Kobe. Speaking directly to you, Michael, we had this vision that we are going to take our show on the road and do some public speaking, and we're going to invite the likes of Chris Smith, who is in the audience today, and who Kobe did a shout out to, and have he and a few other people speak on stage with us. And I am looking forward to the possibility that you're going to be able to do that with us, and you'll fly to the United States. If you have any interest in Las Vegas, then we'll put you up here, and we'll speak to an audience in Las Vegas. I think this has been a fabulous show. I knew it was going to be when we first met, and I think I mentioned that to you at that time. So thank you very much for being on, and I look forward to doing it again. So Kobe, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, man. I want to piggyback on that and say it was a really great show. I learned a lot. I'm like you. I like to learn from everybody I meet, even Lloyd. just playing, Lloyd. But no, it was a great show. I love what you stand for. I love your energy. I like what you're doing. And you say you have a podcast?
Yes, yeah. So it's called Catapult Your Career, and so I try. Basically, what I do is I try to have it as like we're chatting in the pub. I want to become a doctor, so I get, say, a doctor to come on, talk about the reality of that career. So then people who are looking to transition careers, say, into the world of medicine, can then hear the reality, hear what it's like, and stuff like that. So I try and get what I call quote unquote careers, so to interrogate what the reality is, to then share to my listeners.
Love it. I'm definitely going to check that out. So if you're just joining us or you're coming in at the tail end, we've had Michael Glassick on our show. He's a career change coach. It was a great show. I recommend you going back and checking out the replay. It'll be up in a few days. Also, like, subscribe. We want to keep bringing you great guests. We want to keep supporting everybody in this crazy world of things that's going on. You know, we sit on probably the personal development side of coaching. So this all fits. We all have a mission. We're serving. So like, subscribe, share, engage. If you want to get on the show, send me the messages. I'll put the banner up right now. You can just send me a message if you want to get on the show. You got questions or even feedback to help us get better. We're all in this together. Thanks for watching. Great Employees Matter. Greatness, excellence, motivation, always be a gem.
Thank you, everybody.